Hi, my name is Bente. I'm the Norse witch, and today I'm talking to Aster Perpetua about Brazilian folk witchcraft. I'm very, very excited about this interview because I know little to nothing about Brazilian folk witchcraft or folk magic, literally only what I've seen on your channel. So I'm extremely excited. I will learn so much. I'm here for it. But of course, for anyone who doesn't know you yet, first of all, highly recommend her channel. It's amazing. Would you mind introducing yourself and your practice and tell everyone where they can find you?
So, hello everybody. First of all, Benta, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. From viewer to interviewee, that's my God. I cannot put it into words. So, I am Aster. I am born and raised in Brazil. I grew up surrounded by Afro-Brazilian spiritual influences, and those things are very much present in my practice as a folk witch. You can find me on YouTube, Aster Perpetua, and also on Instagram, also on TikTok, but I'm not posting on TikTok anymore because TikTok is not the best place to be
Agreed.
honest. Yeah, so probably Benta is going to leave my links in the description. You can take a
Definitely.
look. There's a lot of content on my YouTube about Brazilian spirituality, Afro Brazilian in particular. So I'm pretty sure that you will be able to find some information that you didn't know before. And I am super happy to be here to introduce all of that to you guys.
I'm also extremely excited. As I said, I know only like a few things that I picked up from your videos, because I'm also an avid viewer of your videos. So I'm like 99% sure that also my viewers will learn so many new things, because of course it's a very different practice from what I'm doing. So that's very, very exciting.
Oh
So
my God. Yeah, I hope that I can share some things with you guys. Like it's kind of crazy to think that I am teaching people. Like what?
that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, as always, my interviews are not born from my brilliant mind, but from my viewers' brilliant minds. So, all of the questions that I have prepared for you today are questions that my viewers came up with. Some of them are also Brazilian and they wanted to know something about their own folk craft. And some, as me, got never really in touch with it and knew literally nothing. So, we have questions from very, very general questions, which we will start with. It's more of like general knowledge about it and like definitions and things like that. But we also have more personal questions, which we will talk about later on in the video, as always. And also, as always, I know there are always some things that are maybe more private to people, or there are some topics that some people don't necessarily want to or are not allowed to talk about. In case that is the case with some of my questions, just let me know and then we will skip it.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, shall we jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All
Let's
right,
go.
we will start with something very, very general.
Okay.
How common are paganism and witchcraft or also other magical practices in Brazil? Is it like a very, very niche thing or is it very common?
So it is very common, I would say. It is very much like known and spread because we had indigenous practices. It all starts with colonization, unfortunately. So there had been native practices, some still exist, but they are within indigenous tribes, and the regular Brazilian person doesn't have access to that, unfortunately. But what did spread a lot throughout the culture was the African influences. And we still have today religions that come from those practices, from those beliefs. But due to how history happened and how racism is so ingrained in Brazilian culture, everything that is African derived is still fights for its space in society. It's not really very much respected. There is a lot of prejudice. So it is very common. Many people practice Afro-Brazilian religions, but they're not socially well seen. Christianism in its forms will always be better seen to the eyes of others than a practice that is African derived. So unfortunately, that's the reality of it.
Ugh.
Yeah, I can even make a comparison. Like we have spiritismo, spiritualism. I'm not sure how to say it in English, but kardecismo. It is a religion that gets in touch with spirits, but there is a whole Christian thing revolving around it. And also, if we look at the history, it was Brazilian elites who took Allan Kardec's works into Brazilian culture because they could, one, afford buying French books, and two, they could read French books. So they learned from Allan Kardec, who was a gentleman who lived in 19th century Paris, by the way. He decided to take up the mission of tapping into the spiritual world. Back in his time, he suffered the consequences of taking spirituality seriously, but he wrote several books, and those books were taken to Brazil by the elites. A religion was founded around it. People can still join that religion, and that's a whitewashed version of like maybe not pagan because they have Christianism in it, but of getting in touch with spirits directly. Whereas Umbanda, for example, that's less accepted because it comes from the common people, the Black people. There are spirits of marginalized people like slaves, indigenous people, prostitutes, so on and so forth. So we have those two types of religions that contact spirits, but one is whitewashed and the other isn't. So many people in Brazil, if you ask them, oh, if you wouldn't be a Christian, what would you choose as a religion? I would choose Kardecism because it's a type of spirituality that is Christianized and whitewashed. So
fun.
Yeah.
I hate it that's like such a common story that you hear from so many different cultures. Like white people came here and they brought their racism and everything went to shits.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
But I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful though that so many, I mean, even though like of course colonialism is horrible and like the whole background behind it is horrible, but I think it's really cool that so many cultures did come together and like intermingle basically.
Yeah, it's very nice that at least we got to see a little bit of the African heritage. It survived. It's still there. It's part of our culture. I wish we could say the same thing about indigenous practices, because like in my town, the town that I come from, there's like stuff named after the indigenous tribes that lived there originally. Mm-hmm. So you can see from that indigenous people were really very present in the area, but I've never met an indigenous person in my entire life, and I grew up there. Wow. So you can have an idea of the extent of the extermination, and with that goes the culture and the spirituality. So it's a pity that today Brazilian people don't know anything about indigenous spirituality. It's really a pity.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's also very understandable that the indigenous people like want to protect the things that they still have left. Just a question of curiosity, because I have to admit that I'm not very well versed in like Brazilian history. So I think that's a fact for a lot of different people. At least in Germany, you don't learn a lot of history outside of Europe. That's the sad fact. I would just think that when like the white people came over and of course like brought African slaves to Brazil. Do you think the fact that the like Afro-Brazilian religions and practices are more widespread is because like the black slaves were like useful to the white people, so they like accepted it more than the indigenous practices?
So I would say, as a layperson, I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a researcher or anything historian. I'm not. I've read a few books and it stops there. But I would say that once Portuguese colonizers arrived in Brazil, they tried to enslave the indigenous people. That didn't go very well. Often indigenous people, they would kill themselves and not be enslaved. So that didn't go well. That's why they started taking other populations to become slaves. And there was a huge genocide. The indigenous people who didn't die either by being exterminated or committing suicide, they were converted into Christianism. So they had to abandon all their beliefs. So it became almost impossible for their original spirituality to make throughout the centuries. It became almost impossible. But then when it comes to the enslaved Africans, well, in Brazil, they found a little something that in the United States, for example, was a little bit more complicated, which were the saints. Like the United States, they were colonized by English people and they were Protestants. So it was difficult to disguise several different entities and Orishas if you didn't have masks for them. However, in Brazil, Portuguese were Catholics and they had many saints. So that gave to the Africans a tool to, like a mask with which to hide the entities that they were really worshiping. So syncretism played a major role in that. And also, I've read in a book that was actually written by an anthropologist. This is an authority right there. And it is Candomblé and Umbanda, Paths of Brazilian Devotion by Wagner Gonçalves da Silva. If you can read Portuguese, I highly recommend this book. And in here, he says that to an extent, African spirituality was tolerated because there were many different tribes that were brought together to work as slaves. And as long as they had some differences among them, they would be separated. So the dominant class was afraid that if they would forbid all slaves to believe what they wanted to believe in, they would have a reason to unite against the oppressor. So they were expected to have Christian behavior, but their original beliefs were also kind of tolerated to avoid havoc from happening.
Wow.
And that's okay if people don't know about Brazilian history. If you ask me about German history, I know nothing. I know that there was the Wall of Berlin, and I know that there was the Second World War. That's about it.
the two important things. the one expert that we do have is a tiny dude with a weird mustache that wasn't even German.
You see, I didn't know that. My God.
Yeah, he was Austrian actually.
Oh, that's right. So you see, it's natural. Like if you're not from a certain part of the world, you will not know the history, and that's okay.
But that's honestly, that's why I love these interviews, because I get to learn so many new things, and I think it's extremely important, especially when it comes to spiritual practices, to have some kind of exchange, because only if we know the history behind the other cultures and the other practices, then we can properly respect them and respect like their boundaries. And for example, if they're close practices, we know why. It makes everything much easier.
Yes.
So, since different kinds of religions and practices and traditions are pretty widespread in Brazil, are there any like superstitions that are kind of shared and very widespread? Like I know in basically every culture there's like this one superstition that everyone does, even though they're maybe not even religious. Like in Germany, I don't know, we knock 3 times on wood when something good happens
Yeah,
because
we do that too. Like we have the knocking on the wood, but like it's if someone says something that you don't want to happen at all, you go 3 times and you knock on wood. Nada. Vira essa
Oh,
boca pra lá.
we do that. We do that when we say something positive that happened. So kind of we say like, oh yeah, I don't know, I won 100 euros playing the lottery, and then we knock 3 times so that like no like evil eye can come on us because other people are jealous.
Yeah, no, actually it's the opposite in Brazil. It's to avoid something we don't want from happening. No, not here. Not today, Satan.
The protective knocking. But that's so cool because especially this knocking thing seems to be so widespread.
Yeah, it seems that everywhere on the globe there's a variation of that. I would say that there's also the horseshoe. That's like putting a horseshoe on top of the door to keep bad energies outside. That's a classic that was probably taken to Brazil by Europeans.
Probably.
And yeah, I think at the top of my head, those are the ones that come.
Really cool. Okay, so we're talking like especially about Brazilian folk witchcraft and Brazilian folk magic, but of course like we both are like accustomed to like more modern witchcraft practices. Where would you personally see like the main differences, but maybe also the main similarities between these two? Like, are there any practices that exist in both practices, or are they completely different maybe?
So, witchcraft versus folk magic. I think that when it comes to Brazilian magic, sorcery, etc., there's a little bit of a division because somebody who is in Umbanda, Candomblé, Kimbanda, they will never say that they are a witch because it's just not how it's called, you know. They will use other terms. But there are definitely many similarities between the African-derived practices, pagan practices from the past, and witchcraft. So, in the medieval times, during colonization and slavery, etc., as I was just telling you in the first part of our call, that's going to be on my channel, by the way.
I was about to say, hop over for the other part to Aster's channel.
Yes. So during that period, that history period, there was Inquisition in Europe. And many people who were condemned as witches and sorcerers in Portugal and Spain, they were sent to Brazil to be exiled there. And those practitioners, they took their practices with them. So popular Brazilian spirituality became this huge cauldron with so many different elements coming together. So there were a little bit of the indigenous practices that went into there, the African practices, and a little bit of European witchcraft. But witchcraft goes a little bit a different route. It never became a religion, and of course, it became instantly demonized. There were visits of the Inquisition in Brazil to see if people were not being Christian enough, and some people were sent to Portugal to be judged and condemned. But like something similar, even though those two spiritual paths, magical paths, they are parallels, but they go different ways a little bit. There are some similarities. When I became interested in witchcraft and I started reading about it, I immediately saw many similarities. Like, for example, the use of herbs, how to use candles,
Mm.
How to, like, using the days of the week, using the phases of the moon. Those are all things that you can also find in Brazilian folk magic. And I call Brazilian folk magic all the types of magic that belong to our culture. Like, for example, something that is super widespread, and the Brazilians watching me, they will be able to say, yeah, I've heard of that. I'm sure you have. Simpatia. Simpatia. This is the word that we use to call spells. Little
Oh.
spells that we do to fix little things. I'm going to do a simpatia to get a job. I'm going to do a simpatia to get the attention of that person I'm interested in. I'm going to do a simpatia to clean out my energy. This is super common, and it is part of the culture. Those elements, like how to use candles, smudging, bath magic, etc., so on and so forth, they are present in Brazilian folk magic, but also in witchcraft. Witchcraft practices. So when I started reading about witchcraft, I wanted to learn about it. I was kind of surprised to see, oh my God, so this is witchcraft? So
I'm already doing it.
Apparently, I have to communicate something to my mom. We've been doing something here that we were not aware of.
That's so interesting that like little spells like that are so common. That's
You're
kind of
super-
surprising to me.
It is super common. It is part of the culture. I dare say there is no Brazilian person that can say they never heard of simpatias, because it is something so popular, so common.
Wow. So like a random person who wouldn't even consider themselves to be a magical practitioner would like light a candle for good luck or to attract a partner or something.
Totally, they could, yeah. Even someone who is
Wow.
Christian, they probably do try simpatias every now and then, because it's something open that any person can perform. And actually, I have a playlist on my channel. There's only like 4 videos so far, but I call it Simpatia Book, the Simpatia Book, where I'm gonna share a few of the things that I know, because it is something so, I would say, fundamental of Brazilian folk magic. It has to be part of my content. So yeah,
So
even
cool.
if a person has never performed the simpatia, they definitely have heard about it. They know that this thing exists because it is so common.
That's really cool. Also, such a cute word. Like that's definitely prefer that word to spell.
Simpatia. Oh, I even forgot to put the microphone. My God. So I have a theory. This is from my head. Nobody told me. I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I think that it is called simpatia because it kind of works as sympathetic magic in a way. I think it's because of that.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that also makes sense. I mean, all of these like these typical small spells, they are usually sympathetic magic.
Yeah. And I have no evidence, but the name and yeah, I think it's because of that.
Etymology. Nobody will ever really know. So, okay. Of course, as with any type of folk magic and folk witchcraft, we always have to talk about this very specific thing. Is Brazilian folk magic closed, or is it open, or are like parts of it closed maybe, or is like everyone welcome to practice it?
So I usually make a comparison between Christianity, like being a Catholic rather, and like, because a lot of the things that I practice, they come from Umbanda, because my mother's family, they were part of Umbanda for years, and this kind of thing stays within the family. It's knowledge passed down generation after generation. So a lot of what I do comes from Umbanda. even if I'm not initiated in anything. And we're gonna get there. So when it comes to those things that relate to the religious practices, okay, so how do I view it? It's like being a Catholic. Anyone can go to church, anyone can light a candle for a saint, petition a saint. They can have an altar at home for a saint if they want to. Everybody can, I don't know, pray. You know, you are free to go to mass, right? If you want. But just because you are including those elements in your personal spirituality, that doesn't give you the right to dress up as a priest and say the mass on Sunday morning. So it is similar. Me, I have my altar. I reach out to the entities that are part of my spiritual team, and through the lenses of Umbanda, let's say, I do my things, etc., but that does not make me a religious authority. I cannot go ahead and open a temple and all of a sudden start becoming possessed by spirit and providing services for other people, because I'm not initiated. I don't have the experience. I don't have the years of doing things the way it's supposed to be done. Even if I am Brazilian and I have my own practice, I don't have the requirements, the official requirements to be a religious authority. So that's one thing. Another thing is that if I would want to, I could totally follow that path, and any other person on the planet could. If you all of a sudden, Benta, you decide, you know what, I'm gonna get into this. You can. There's no prohibition.
I'm so over Norse paganism.
Tired of this. I'm gonna try something different. So
Very different.
Person can visit. Yes. Any person can visit temples. Like if you, I don't know, for people in Germany or other parts in the world watching this video, go to Google, type in the name of your town, the name of your city, and Umbanda temple. I'm sure there's gonna be something nearby. And if you want, just out of curiosity, you can visit. You can go there and take a look, see how it is. And if, like, people who feel so inclined, they could even join the temple as a medium. Over here in France, because by the way, we haven't mentioned this yet, but I live in France. And over here, I did visit a temple, an Umbanda temple. And over there, I had the opportunity of having a conversation with one of the mediums of the temple, who was a French lady. She was a French lady, and she's been a medium of the temple for over 20 years. So there's no prohibition of origin, skin color, gender, whatever. Any person is welcome to visit, to join. As long as you do things properly and respectfully, anyone is welcome. And that lady, she told me a little bit of how she got into Umbanda. She said she was visited by a spirit. And she thought she was crazy, because we're here in France, people are very rational. There's no space for spirituality, for the unseen and intuition and whatever.
Yeah, same here.
No. So it was complicated for her to understand what was happening, because everywhere she looked, there was no information for her to find. And then she took up this pursuit. No, I'm gonna find out what the heck was this. And then she came across this the Brazilian practices. She traveled to Brazil. And when she came back, she joined a temple. So she did everything that she was supposed to in order to enter the practice properly as a medium. If that's the case, anybody can do it.
That's so interesting. That's very interesting. Like a random French person gets visited by a spirit and finds their way into Umbanda.
Yeah, that's what happened. I found it so cool.
Yeah, but that's also, I mean, especially if you're working as a medium, I mean, do the spirits care through like which body they send the message?
Not
Doesn't
at
really matter.
all. Not at all. This is the thing with incarnated humans. We make everything so overly complicated when it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be. It doesn't matter if she's French or Brazilian, spirit has to do what it has to do.
Yeah.
She's just a vessel, you know?
Yeah. For the spirit, it just matters that the message comes across. So like
Exactly.
where the person is from doesn't really matter. I mean, it would be good if the person spoke a language that other people understood, but
Yeah, well, after 20 years, she ended up learning Portuguese.
that's great.
Yeah, because that's kind of, yeah, you can't really escape the language if you go to that type of a temple, because everybody there most likely will be Brazilian. And yeah, like when you get together with other German people, you speak German, right? It's just natural. So
That's true.
yeah, but I totally recommend anybody watching, just out of curiosity, visit a temple. It's going to be super interesting for you to take a look, because I'm sure you've never seen anything like it before. I'm sure.
I bet. Now I will like once we hop off the call, I will definitely Google it and see if there's something around.
Probably there will be.
With the last question, you already mentioned that like tiny little magical acts are very widespread in Brazil. If that is the case, I would assume that Brazilian culture and people in general are probably also pretty open to like more new agey practices. Has that, like in general, new age practices, have they in some way like influenced or impacted the local folk practice?
Totally, totally. I would say that people, especially the younger generations, they are looking much more into witchcraft nowadays than into Brazilian magic, because witchcraft is what is trending. It's what's on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. It's all over the place. So people, they are definitely looking into witchcraft. And there's also a little something in there, historically speaking, because Brazil, I think the independence came around in 1822, something like this. And until that point in history, Brazil was very much attached to Portugal, and everything, even the culture and all, everything was very tied to Portugal. Once the independence came about, there was that rupture. And then during some years, like in the 19th century, some decades, Brazilians didn't really have an identity. But that idea that everything that came from Europe was superior and preferable and ideal, it stayed within the collective consciousness. And to this very day, Brazilians have the behavior of giving a lot of value to everything that comes from other countries, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, rather than valuing what is ours and what is local. That happens with art in its various forms. It happens, of course, with spirituality as well. So why would someone who learned to be like that from a very early age, just learned through culture and watching everybody else diminishing Brazilian culture, why would they look at Brazilian culture for spirituality, right? So they look for spirituality on the internet, on European and North American influencers. And as a matter of fact, a little bit of why I decided to create my content in English was to try and show to Brazilians the value of our culture. Because everybody who is from, like everybody I've spoken to so far, the other content creators and also viewers who are from other countries, they're super interested and curious to learn about Brazilian spirituality. Whereas most of the time, Brazilians themselves aren't. And that's something that breaks my heart a little bit. And I am trying to change that a little bit. I mean, spiritual paths are several, and they are like the open ones. They are free for any person to choose which one they prefer. So if you want to connect to the Norse pantheon, or I don't know, Greek pantheon, so on and so forth, feel free. But my biggest question here is, why not choose your own culture first? Instead of becoming, I don't know, interested in Hecate, why not find out who your Pombagira is? She's right there beside you. Why not do that instead? You know? Because I think people don't even consider their own culture when it comes to spirituality, because Pombagira and Eshu, those are entities that are commonly associated with negativity, with the devil, devilish practices. So people grow up with that negative view of them from the get-go. So yeah, they will not look for them when it comes to spirituality. They will look elsewhere. So yeah,
That's
all of
so
that
sad.
to say that, yeah, it's a pity. It is a pity, because Brazilian spirituality is super rich. It is powerful. It is filled with like our ancestry, our history, you know, of who we are. And I wish more people would look at our own culture and embrace it more. You see.
That is sad, but that seems to also be quite the widespread thing. At least it seems like, even though it's a completely different reason why, but it seems to be the same thing in Germany. Of course, in Germany, we don't have this whole issue of like our history and our culture and our cultural practices being like demonized or anything. That's not the case. But we have this same thing that you mentioned about France. It's hyper rationalistic. I would guess, even though quite a lot of people are like baptized or something like that, still, I would say 80% probably are atheists or agnostic. So people just don't believe in anything, which I personally think is kind of sad. But of course, that makes people who grow up here feel like there is nothing here. There is no cultural practices that they could pick up. So in Germany, we have the same problem where everyone just grasps for different things. That's why we have like horrid cultural appropriation of especially Eastern practices. That's why, for example, burning white sage is so widespread in Germany, because it's like, well, if you have no lore really that is being passed down by generations about the plants that grow here, then you don't really know that there is something that you could do. So you kind of feel like you have to pick what you see on the internet. It's very sad. But now, the spirits that you were mentioning made me very curious. Would you mind like explaining a little bit about them?
Yes. So there are, in Umbanda, there are several different lines of work. So they are called. And those are different types of spirits. We have the right hand path with spirits such as black elders, pretos velhos, caboclos, which are indigenous people spirits. What else do we have? We have boiadeiros, which are kind of people who dealt with farms and cattle, let's say. Yeah, we have several different spirits in the right hand path. Then we have the left hand path with entities such as Exu and Pombagira, and also Malandro. So who are they? Pombagira, I have a whole video about that beautiful lady on my channel, but basically Pombagira will always be a female spirit. They are, all of them, all of those spirits, they are ancestors. They reach out to us, like they are connected to us by affinity, by family, by, you know, they are part of our family, unknown family somehow. They were either in the family themselves, or they were adopted into it, or they married into it, or they were very close to our family through friendship, for example. So all of those spirits, they are ancestors, and they are accompanying people. Not every single line of work necessarily, but some of those spirits, they are just there because they are your guardians. And that's the case with Exu, Pombagira, and Malandro. Pombagira is a lady. She can be found at cemeteries and crossroads. She's very sassy. She's very, like, you do not mess with her. And once you start working with her, you become just like that. It's very funny.
Sounds like a badass spirit.
She is such a badass woman. You know, it's the woman you want to be.
Nice.
They are known for being extremely beautiful. They are known for handling matters very quickly, because not only Pombagira, but also Exu and Malandro, because they are spirits of the street. They are on the roads. It's a lot of movement. Everything that you put in their hands gets solved very quickly. Exu, this spirit has the same name as the Orisha, but it's not the same entity. Oh. Now I don't really have in my mind why we use the same name, but different entities. It's not the Orisha, it's the guardian. Exu, they will be a male spirit, and it's the same type of energy as a Pombagira. Very agile, very much in charge, fast. And it's like there's a male and female just to balance the energies, I would say. And what else can I say about him? I don't particularly have an Exu with me. I have a Pombagiras and one Malandro. But yeah, Malandro is such a good energy. It's like the fun of the party, you know. It's such a joy, and it's that kind of smart person that knows their way around things and will get things fixed for you. Yeah, I know a way. Let's go.
Nice.
It's that kind of vibe. So who were those people? All of those spirits that I have mentioned, right side, right hand and left hand, they used to be alive, right? They are ancestors. They used to be alive. And they were most of the time marginalized for some reason. Like Pombagiras, they were often women of the night. So they very often they were prostitutes. Malandros, they were people who became so smart because they had to find a way to survive. And those spirits, once they pass away, they go through an evolutionary process. They evolve spiritually, and at a certain point they become, I believe it is a choice of the spirit to become an entity, become a guardian to the newer generations. And they choose you, like you choose one another, by affinity, personality traits, sometimes karma, sometimes personal missions, and that's set before you are born. So everybody has Pombagira, Exu, etc. You have it. If you reach out to them, they will reply. Everybody watching this, take a look at who your Pombagira is. Maybe especially the Brazilians.
Interesting thing, maybe I already connected to it without knowing it, because I actually have an ancestral spirit around that's like around me all the time. So maybe, who knows?
Yeah, and the other day you made a video talking about the Filgiacuno. Is that right?
Yeah, the Filgiacuna.
Voila. I'm starting to mix French in the thing. Sorry.
But that was quite the good pronunciation, I have to say.
I thank you. I tried to speak another language for a second, and then French came in.
French was nope.
So when I watched that video, I was very surprised of how similar the description was
I was
of
about
a
to say that.
Pombagira.
Yeah.
It is very similar. So yeah, it's probably the same kind of entity, but just with a different name, because it's the same kind of vibe, the same mission. They are guardians. They are with you. And I love mine. I am super proud to talk about them. I have two girls, two pombagiras with me, and I love them. And I have one malandro. So those are my triad, my trinity. And yeah, we get together every week. I make offerings for them. And as I usually say, we sit down and we gossip. It's wonderful.
I can already imagine that. What's the tea from the spirit world? Tell me.
Oh my God. And yeah, it's just spirits that they really care about you, because I mean, it's kind of like family, and they are patient with you, but it's not all rainbows and leaping bunnies, okay? They are very fierce spirits. This is not to be taken as a joke. This is to be taken seriously. You never break a promise that you make for them, because they're going to kick your ass. Like a parent is scolding a child for misbehaving. They will go after you, okay? So the veneration process is actually very simple. You have to cook something with your own hands. Pay attention to like time period. They didn't have donuts centuries ago, so something simple. You know, like I've made, for example, cake, some traditional cakes like fubá cake, which is a corn cake that we have in Brazil. I've made soup. I've made bread, homemade bread, like the dough and everything.
The German
Yeah.
in me.
So once a week, I take the time to cook a little something. And they are the elders. They are your elders. So the first piece goes to them. First, I put everything on the altar. I put a drink for them as well, alcoholic. Each one of them likes something different. So some alcoholic drink, the piece of something that I've cooked. And then I light the candles. Each one of them has a different candle. And yeah, first thing you do is to thank them. You thank them for, I usually thank them for existing, for being in my life, because yeah, they do so much for me. They take care of me in unbelievable ways. And the first thing you do is to thank them. They don't owe you anything. And you don't start asking for stuff. That's very disrespectful. So you are paying them your respects. So you're not going to do that by asking for stuff first. And also, it's not about buying expensive things to give to them. It's about the energy, the time, the love and care that you put into making something. Even if it's, I don't know, a carrot cake. The time that you put into it and the care and everything, the energy, that's what we call ashe. It's the magical energy that drives things. So that's what matters. They want to feel your appreciation through what you are giving them. So buying stuff, it also doesn't work. Yeah, it's basically it.
That sounds great, especially that you cook something for them, especially. I really like that, especially as someone who doesn't even cook for themselves. That's always very impressive for me.
Yeah, that was actually something good for me personally, because I would never bake a bread for myself. If I can just go to the supermarket and get a loaf of bread, why in the hell would I get flour and, do the thing myself? It's a lot of work to make bread, you guys. It's fun, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean that makes it special, right? I mean, if I
Yeah,
was
and yeah.
yeah, if I was like cooking something really like from scratch for my ancestors or for some kind of spirit, that would be a huge offering. Even if it's probably like financial wise less valuable than like a bottle of meat or something, it would
Mhm.
still probably be a bigger offering because I don't usually cook, so it's like a huge thing of energy and time for me.
Yes, there you go. It's the energy that is the
Yeah.
most important thing in there, and also the time. Also, I emphasize paying attention to simple recipes, things that people were probably eating 200-300 years ago.
Yeah.
It's simple stuff that didn't need a fridge, that didn't need, I don't know, stuff that we use today. Think like, if this was 300 years ago, what would I cook?
Oh yeah.
It's something simple with just a few ingredients. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. Damn it.
That's fine. Maybe it will pop up later on.
Yeah.
But now we already got a little bit into spirits, which thank you. Very, very interesting. And yeah, I was about to bring up the same thing about the Filkia and them being very, very similar, which I think is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
Yeah.
because on the interview on your channel, we already talked about some other similarities
Similarities.
between
Yeah.
Scandinavian and Brazilian things. So
Yeah. I
if you're
still
interested in
have that
that,
theory.
yeah,
That theory that at the end of the day, we're talking to the same entities. We just call them different names. So,
yeah,
yeah, if you're interested in knowing what we're talking about, make sure to take a look on my channel because there's a video of us together over there as well.
yeah, definitely check it out. Now there was this one viewer who had a very specific question, and I don't know where
Mm-hmm.
this person was coming from with this question, but maybe you
Okay.
know, because the question was if Saint Cyprian holds any importance in Brazilian folk magic.
Yes, because as I have mentioned, during colonial times, witches were exiled in Brazil, and some of them they took with them a little something that I have right here. Oh,
Oh,
what is it? The Book of Saint Cyprian,
ah,
which we have in an English translation for nowadays, thanks to scholar José Leitão, who is a Brazilian. I have to mention it. I have to, give credit where credit is due. But so, those sorcerers, they took the book of Saint Cyprian to Brazil. And many of the things that are in this book, they became part of common practices. Let's say there's something very much known about that I'm not going to get into details here because I don't want to give anybody bad ideas, but it is something involving a frog, using an alive frog.
huh.
It is something that people still do today, and that comes from this book. So there is definitely a space. As history happened throughout the centuries, many things from this book, they came into folk practice for sure.
Interesting. Was maybe since this book became so influential, did Saint Cyprian himself become a part of the practices, like as a spirit?
Not that much, I would say. Not that much.
Okay.
Personally, I cannot really tell you about anyone who works with Saint Cyprian as a spirit. I've never. There might be, probably there are people who do that, but I never heard of anyone.
Okay.
Probably there are. But something also interesting about this book is that a whole legend kind of was built around it to scare people away, to fearmonger people, and keep them from having the book. So it is believed today that if you have this book at home, bad things will happen. And to this day, there are people who are afraid of having a copy of Saint Cyprian's book at home because of those little stories that everything will fall apart and your life is going to become misery. That's from colonial times, just to keep people from acquiring occult knowledge. There you go.
So interesting, because I know that back when the grimoires had a lot of importance in Europe, I know that those kinds of superstitions were also like made up, because of course, like, they're fear mongering, of course they're made up, about all of these books. But at least in Germany, they haven't really survived. So I think it's really interesting that in Brazil they did survive.
They did. I think that's really rooted into Christianity and like Christianizing people, the level up which they were able to Christianize the mentality of people. Brazil today still is a very Christian country. So of course that everything that relates to paganism, spirits, witchcraft, people see very negatively, actually, to this very day.
Wow. I think it's always so cool how we see these cultural exchanges. I think that's incredibly fascinating. I will never not be astonished by it. But all right, those were all the more general questions. So let us dive more into your personal questions. Of course, we have to start with this one. How did you personally get into Brazilian folk witchcraft?
Well, it was something, it's just the things that we do. Like I've mentioned before, my mother's family, so my grandma, aunt, uncles, etc., they were all in an Umbanda temple. My grandma was a medium, my aunt was a medium. So when you are part of the temple, you learn a lot of things. And that was the life that they had, this life full of magic. And my mother, she didn't become a medium because she was afraid of spirits, and she still kind of is, I have to admit.
So she was cool with like conversing with them through other mediums, but not as a medium herself.
When spirits started reaching out to her, she became scared as fuck, and she asked the high priest to, no, I don't want it, make them go away.
That's kind of cute.
She was afraid. Oh my god, yeah. So even if she was just kind of watching a little bit from afar, she was also part of the whole thing, because she would go to the temple with her family and watch everything, so on and so forth. She learned a lot, and she raised me. So of course that I learned a lot just through watching her. She would just do things. Like as a child, I remember going to temples with her. I remember her performing smudgings around the house, also having to deal with hexes being thrown in our yards.
Oh no! How dare they?
Cemetery dirt, strings of knots, burned down candles. She would find those things in the yard, and then she had to deal with it. So I grew up in it. It was nothing planned or intentional. We are folk practitioners in this house. No, it was just natural. It was just the things we did and the things we experienced. And learning how to use candles, learning how to use the moon, learning to go to a crossroads and do something. It was just things we did. There was nothing too elaborate about it. Yeah.
That's really cool. I was about to say I'm always a little bit envious of people who just grew up with those practices, but I have to admit I'm very envious of people who grew up with it. Simply because, like, for me that was not at all the case. Like, literally grew
I can't imagine
up without
in Germany.
anything.
Yeah.
But I'm happy for you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I have to say that it is very cool to have someone to ask your questions to.
Oh, yes.
Like, there was a day that I wanted to do a working at a cemetery, and I could just ask my mom. And she was like, oh, here's what you're going to do. You're going to talk to this spirit, and you're going to do this and this. And don't forget to, it's nice to have that reference.
So convenient. and you don't have to question yourself all of the time, being like, is this source like credible?
Accurate.
Or yeah, because it's like, it's my mom, of course. Would you say you are, because you said you grew up with Umbanda, is it still like a big part of your practice? Like, are you practicing it as seriously as your mom and your grandma, for example? Or is it now more of a like side project?
No. So, because I moved countries, I don't really have access to temples here. It's like in Brazil, it's very common. You can find a temple everywhere. It's not complicated. But over here, it's not the case. I am in another culture. Yeah. So there are temples, but it's not that accessible. I cannot go there all the time. So I had to learn how to do things myself. So sometimes I consult with Pai de Santo, as we call it, the Saint Father, which is the religious authority of the temple. Sometimes I have consultations just to check if everything is all right, spiritually speaking for me, if there's anything that my entities want me to know, if they're needing anything. What else? Yeah, you just have to learn things by yourself, because over here, I don't have any reference. I don't have anyone to ask. So my mother became a very important source, and the Saint Father that I consult with from time to time. Those are I would say, the bonds that I still do have. That, yeah, but when it comes to a religious structure, I don't have that at all. And I wouldn't, like, I do not practice possession. That's not part of my practice, because that requires a community. That's not something you should be trying to do by yourself, because you're like, if you've never done it, you're so not prepared for what it is like. You cannot do it alone. Yeah. It could be dangerous. You could fall, and then there would be nobody there to catch you and help you. Yeah. So I don't do that. What I am developing is like the ability of hearing them. That is kind of baby steps kind of thing. I get a few words here and there, and it's so cool, to yeah, my God, I can't wait to be able to have full conversations. But we're getting there.
I can't even imagine. Like, my clairaudience is non-existent.
Yeah, I'm super anxious for it, like, to develop more.
It can be scary, I would presume, but also very convenient.
Not really. It's not that. It's not scary, I would say. Once it starts happening, you take it naturally, because you're kind of expecting it already. So it just.
But what happens if a scary spirit comes up and talks to you?
But then you have to be sure who you're talking to. That's something very important. Like, I light candles for my entities, right? Every time I'm going to light a candle, I hold it and I say, this candle is for the spirit so-and-so. Because then just any random thing could come, right? Yeah. So when you are reaching out to spirit, you have to know who you're talking to. Like, that's rule number 1. Know who you want to talk to.
Yeah. And if it's a spirit that you have just encountered, find out a name that you can call them so that you can actually address them properly.
Yes, preferably their real name, because if they come and tell you some random name, then you will not be able to catch them later. You know, if they leave you in some tricky situation, it's going to be too late for you if you don't know their real name.
Yeah, definitely. Spirit work. Alongside Umbanda, do you maybe also practice some kind of like syncretized Christian practices?
That is a thing that exists. It is very common because, after all, we've had syncretism happening.
Yeah.
But that is something that personally I do not like. I don't like to have Christian elements in my practice because they are not really part of the original culture. So I try to, I don't try. I don't have any Christian elements in my practice, and I like it that way. But there are many people who do, like they have Jesus into their practice, they have the saints in their practice, and that's okay. It's more of a personal choice, I would say.
Yeah, totally understandable. I have the same thing in Scandinavian folk magic because in Scandinavian folk magic there is luckily a lot of the pagan roots still in it, so you can definitely practice Scandinavian folk magic without any Christian elements. They are there and you could practice them, but you don't necessarily have to, and I think that's very convenient as a heathen.
Yeah. That's preferable in my opinion, if you ask me.
Same. I also would prefer Christian elements. I don't know, just I don't have a problem with Christianity, but it's just I don't necessarily believe in it, so it's like it would, for me, it would just be an empty phrase if I would like have some kind of spell or some kind of incantation. I would call on maybe Odin and Thor and Jesus. Then like the third element would just be empty.
No sense.
Yeah, it would just be empty. It is, I don't know.
Just hearing you say it, like it makes no sense. Yeah, personally, I believe that Christian elements, like, it's not their place to be in this type of working. I don't know. It's how I feel, but other people feel different.
Yeah, that's just an opinion, and everybody is
just a preference, personal preference.
Luckily, nobody has to incorporate Christian elements. All right. You already like talked about the Orisha a little bit, that like in some practices entities are called the same names, but they're not the Orisha, right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, there's the issue, the guardian issue, and there's the Orisha issue. They kind of, issue, let's say that it's kind of, for the guardian entity, it's kind of a title like Mr., let's say, but they have several subdivisions. Like, for example, there's Exu Veludo, Exu Capa Preta, Exu Tranca-Rua, Exu Arranca-Toco. There are several different ones, as well as the Pombagira. There is Maria Padilha, Maria Farrapo, Maria Mulambo, Rosa Caveira. They are, each one of those names I'm saying, it's a group of spirits. So it's where it gets a little bit more complex, because like this, each spirit joins a certain group due to affinity, life experiences, how they died, etc. They go into a group. And then when they come reach out to the living, they're not going to say, "Hi, my name is Beatrice." They're going to say, "Hi, my name is Maria Padilha," because they're coming from the group Maria Padilha. Maria Padilha das Sete Encruzilhadas. I don't know. So there are many subdivisions, and each group has like thousands of spirits that are part of it. So it's kind of, I see it as kind of a protection for them in a way, because if there is a Maria Padilha who accompanies you and one who accompanies me, they will say that they will present themselves with the same name, but they are not the same spirit. So it's gonna be something very personal, and we can totally get to know the name our guardians had when they were alive, but that's something personal that they will not be telling everybody. you
Okay,
see.
yeah, understandable. That's
And the
interesting.
Orishas, on the other hand, they are deities. It's a different thing.
Do they also exist in some way in Brazilian folk practices?
Yes, definitely, definitely. In Umbanda, it is said that all of those lines of spirits, they vibrate through one of the Orishas' energies.
Mm-hmm.
So the Orishas, they do have a role in Umbanda, but I would say it's not the main focus. It is in Candomblé. Candomblé is a cult of the Orishas.
Ah,
And I'm not well versed when it comes to that. It's not my specialty. But if you want to go deeper with Orisha, you look for Candomblé.
that's interesting. So you probably also don't work with the Orisha.
Not for now, but I could, because like when you are into Umbanda, you have the Saint Father do a Carishal reading for you to check who are the Orishas that rule your head. And everybody has a set of Orishas, and there's like one or two that are the most important, let's say, and you are said to be the daughter or the son of Orisha so and so.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
in my case, there's the Orisha Ishu and the Orisha Yemanja. I could reach out to any of them, but I haven't started that yet because I don't have space for another altar. That's the only reason why.
The altar issue, I know it too well.
Yeah. Don't have space. But whenever I have the chance of going to a beach, because Iemanjá is the Orisha of the seas.
Oh.
So when I can go to a beach, I like to take white roses and offer to her just to acknowledge her, you know.
I love that. I love sea deities. I've personally not connected to any yet, but I really want to because, I mean, if you look at where I was born and grew up and I'm still living, is like the northernmost part of Germany that is literally between two seas. And I was born in a city at the sea. So for me, like the sea is very, very important. So I would really like to start connecting to some sea deities or spirits.
By the way, is there any Norse deity of the sea? Because I know very little about who is it?
There are multiple, depending on what kind of aspect you are looking for. So, for example, there is Njörð, who is like one of the most well-known deities, I would say. But he's more of a deity of like fishing and like commerce over the sea, like kind of things like that. Whereas, for example, if you would look at more for a personification of the sea, then that would be Ran or Ron. It's depending on how you want to pronounce that. Modern Icelandic would be Rán, I think, and Old Norse would be more Ron. I don't know. But that would be her. She is more of the like fearsome deity that like will swallow you, and that's also where people will go who drown. They will go to Ran later on. And she is married to Aegir, who is also a deity of the sea. So it's there are multiple, and of course there are also like spirits of the sea.
Cool.
Yeah, I personally think Ran is really, really cute. Cute. Definitely not cute. Really cool. I once definitely felt her energy when I was in Iceland, and I was at this very specific black sand beach where they have very dangerous sneaker waves who will like, they will not come in very far for a long time, and then just one random wave will come in very, very far at the beach and then swipe you off your feet and draw you into the sea. It's very, very dangerous there. And there are people dying at that beach because they don't expect the waves to come in that far all of a sudden. When we were there, it was extremely windy, extremely stormy. So like the sea was crazy, and I definitely felt Ran's energy when I was there. That was insane. It was so impressive.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. And now I completely forgot where we. Oh yeah, now I remember.
Okay,
I
okay.
just forgot for a moment where we were in the interview. um, yeah, the next question would have been about ancestor work, but of course, like we talked about that already a little bit. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that you do regularly to like venerate your ancestors and work with them?
So I would say that venerating ancestors, like spirits of the dead, are called egun. That's not very much part of the practice in Brazilian culture. People don't really do that. As a matter of fact, there's very much of a culture of just getting rid of everything related to somebody who passed away, which I think is just sad, you know. Like with my grandma, for example, and also my aunt, uncles, etc. They just get rid of everything.
Oh
And
wow.
I hate it. I hate it. But
Yeah.
well, venerating known or unknown ancestors like we see in witchcraft practice, that's not a thing in Brazilian culture.
Hmm.
And that's something that I am still trying to work on. I am trying to build one little altar here. I was reading, I don't know if you have heard about that book, but it's a book called Jambalaya by Louisa Tish. It's a book about Afro American spirituality, and she has some very nice ideas for Egun altars. So I'm gonna try one of those very soon
Cool.
because I want to have that experience. So when I started ancestor work, I actually the responses that I got were from the entities that I venerate now.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if maybe because I am in the other side of the ocean, spirits that passed away not that long ago, maybe they can't cross. I'm not sure if distance plays a role in that, but
Hmm.
I'm gonna go ahead and find out very soon. Um, so yeah, the veneration that I do, that they are still ancestors, but it's not in the same shape as people do in witchcraft, are my
Mhm.
entities over here. And in general, it's not part of the culture. Actually, people are kind of, I would say, scared if they know that you have that kind of thing.
Oh wow.
Um, you can just turn your altar into, I don't know, this picture cabinet that you keep, you know, from with pictures of your relatives, and then people wouldn't notice. I would say. I think that in Brazil people should do that more. Keep
Mm.
memory of the recent ancestors. I think that's not done enough.
That's kind of surprising to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's really not part of the culture. Veneration of ancestors and having pictures of dead relatives all over the place. Yeah, that's something people don't do a lot.
So like if you would die, for example, then you would have to wait like a couple of hundreds of years until you then like maybe become like a Pombagira or something, so that
Voila,
then you can
yeah.
connect to your
And
your.
then maybe somebody decides to pick up spirit work, and then I would maybe have an opportunity. You see?
Yeah. Yeah, it would definitely be more convenient to just be able to commune with like your daughter or your son or your granddaughter or your grandson directly.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that's something that Brazilians should really work on more.
Mm.
Egun connection, which is like spirits of the dead, recent dead, known dead, rather than the unknown.
Yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Um, I just realized that like 90% of the questions that came in for you were about like spirit work. So if you're over talking about spirits, then let me know.
No, No problem. We can
because
continue.
there's another one coming in. But this time, it's about indigenous gods and indigenous spirits.
Mm.
If that is like something that you are allowed to connect to or able to or do.
Personally, I don't have knowledge of indigenous practices, even though I have indigenous ancestry as well. I simply don't have where to get information from. I don't know what tribe those ancestors were from. I don't know if their tribe survived the time. I don't know anything. So that's something that I could try to tap on through Egun work, like spirit work, through those ancestors that are more recent. Well, I will investigate. But when it comes to the concrete realm, I don't have anything. The closest thing that we have access to are caboclos, which are spirits of indigenous people that manifest through Umbanda. And that it also, now I've just remembered, when I had my last consultation with the Saint Father, he told me that there is a guardian in my family who is an indigenous elder woman.
Oh.
And that I can, sometimes I do light a candle for her. And he said that I can call her Granny.
That's so adorable.
Super adorable. And so, yeah, sometimes I light a candle for her and talk to her a little bit. And yeah, that's about it. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of all indigenous heritage.
That's so sad. I hate that.
Yeah.
Well, but maybe or hopefully you will be able to reconnect once you have like gotten into a little bit more of the direct ancestor work. That would be great.
Yeah, I hope so. So what I know is that my grandma's grandfather was an indigenous man. It was the last indigenous person that we have a recollection of. Kind of far back, but well, I will investigate.
Still, it is there. Yeah. Fingers crossed. It would definitely be really cool to be able to reconnect with that part of your ancestry.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
You already talked about it, of course, that you currently don't live in Brazil because you're currently living in France. Of course, everyone who practices some kind of folk practice always has this kind of struggle. Okay, I'm not living in the country anymore that this folk practice is from. So how do you personally manage to like reconnect to the roots or stay with the roots of this folk practice if you're not living in the country anymore?
So for me, still having a bond with my mother definitely helps a lot because she's one of my biggest sources of information and knowledge. Also, the Saint Father also helps a lot. Like, he was the person who told me who my entities are, their names, what they like. It really helped a lot. I mean, you can discover those things on your own, but it takes time and a lot of trial and error. So it was a lot of help to have this person to point the path for me. Also, books, of course, which I have some to recommend in a minute for people who might be curious. Books help a lot when you don't have anywhere else to get information from. Connecting to the unknown ancestors also helps a lot. It keeps me rooted. It keeps me like grounded in who I am and my heritage. Yeah, those are the pillars, I would say, that keep me connected to my roots, to my origins.
It's definitely really, really convenient that you actually have people to talk to.
Yes, it
I,
makes all the difference. My God.
yeah, I kind of feel like that's such a struggle for a lot of people. I guess, like, especially Americans. I kind of feel like people from the US and Canada can probably um, like talk a lot about that. I was about to go into a German idiom because in Germany we have this saying where we say like you can sing a song about it. Like it basically means you know the situation very well, so you can like talk a lot about it. So they probably know the struggle of wanting to connect to an ancestral practice, but you don't have someone who's still alive who you can reconnect with and talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, for those people, of course, reconnecting with their deceased ancestors is, of course, a great way to do so. That's definitely something that's also very, very important for me.
Yeah. And also with the internet, thankfully, there are many saint fathers who have YouTube channels. So I can get a lot of information just from watching those channels. I can recommend some for the
Yes, do
people who
so.
speak Portuguese. Like, for example, there is Umbanda. It's a great channel with a lot of theory about the entities, and you know, it's a great channel. There's Tudo sobre Umbanda also. But those are in Portuguese, right? Unfortunately, it's not going to be for everybody.
There's
But
captions,
those
maybe.
channels, yeah, maybe. Those channels are run by people who like, they are the head of temples. They know what they're talking about. There's also Vozes de Umbanda. I love that channel. The man, the Saint Father there, he brings a lot of old knowledge, old school stuff, how people did things back in the day. I love it.
Oh,
And yeah, 3 recommendations. If you speak Portuguese, take a look at those channels. They are great. And there's a lot of information in them.
that's amazing. Okay, so we actually only have one question left apart from like the outro part. Um, and that's actually a very positive thing to end with because the question is what
Mm.
are your favorite practices or like your favorite thing about your practice?
My favorite thing about my practice is the gossip. It is the part that we sit here and we eat cake and we talk.
The Pombagira gossip.
My God, I love this part. And also the fact that I got into cooking because of it, it's also very rewarding. It became something, a little something of mine, that I do every week. I feel so embraced by these entities. I never felt alone ever again. I remember that when I was back in my hometown and I moved out of my mother's house, I struggled to sleep because I was alone in the apartment. And like my mother was living 10 minutes away. And I don't feel that kind of problem anymore. Also it always feels like there's somebody in the house with me, but not in a disturbing way. It is in a comforting way. You can feel the presence. You can feel like it's just like somebody living with you.
That's
And
beautiful.
I really like it. I really like it. I'm not gonna lie. At the beginning, it's kind of weird. It's kind of scary. You're like, oh my God.
Someone's there watching.
But you get used to it. And as time goes by, you start seeing it as something natural. You get used to it. It becomes just like company. And yeah, I would say that my favorite thing ever are the entities themselves. I just feel something, it's just a connection that I cannot explain. I love it.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, of
Like
course,
when I am
my ancestor work is probably, of course, like a lot different to yours. Especially because like I'm mainly connecting to the spirits of the deceased ancestors themselves. But you just you just know they're looking out for you and like
Yeah.
showing up for you in a crazy, amazing way.
Yeah. 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 And you see the things just happening,
Mm,
in your day-to-day life. And also, like, when I stand here and I light the candles and I start talking, and there are chants for each of them that I do sing, and I start getting the chills on my body. And yeah, it's I cannot put it into words.
I
It
love
is
that.
something that amazes me every time. Like, it's like picking up the phone and having someone answer you.
Mm, I have the same thing with something I have quite recently started with my ancestors for communication, because like I'm not clairaudient. Like I'm pretty clairsentient, but for communication that's kind of tricky. I sometimes do a
Yeah.
yes no pendulum thing with my hands, but like only yes no answers is a little bit tricky. So I always like need a little bit of a helping tool when I'm communicating. And I've recently, or like a couple of months back, tried or started using a black obsidian mirror, just like a slate
Mhm.
of black obsidian, just
Ah,
to
yes.
basically get into a little bit of a trance and open up the channels a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
and it's crazy how that helps and how I instantly feel the connection, and like communicating got so much more easy. Um, and it kind of sometimes feels like they're just planting thoughts right into my head. Like I can have like one specific
That's
question,
it.
and then it's like I have maybe thought about this question for 2 weeks by myself and haven't gotten the answer. And then I sit there with my piece of black obsidian and I stare into this thing for like 15 minutes, getting into a trance, and then I state my question, and then all of a sudden it's just, and the solution is in my head, and I'm like, okay, okay, thanks.
Yes. And I have a suggestion for people who maybe cannot invest in an obsidian mirror. You can just get a bowl of water
Yeah.
gazing. That is something super common in Brazilian practices. And it's like kind of for free. You get a bowl and you get water in it.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you have to separate the bowl only for that purpose and magical purposes. Other than that, it's super simple, a bowl of water, and you gaze into it. Yeah.
Yeah. In general, looking at shiny surfaces is like so common. A bowl of water, some kind of polished stone or crystal, a mirror, or just like I know some people also just use like uh a picture frame and then like just paint the side of the glass, for example, black or something. Works just as well. You don't have to use like a piece of
Yeah,
obsidian.
yeah, I've done that. The painting the glass black. I did that.
Yeah. And it also
And
works.
it does work. It works.
Yeah. I was just lucky to run a shop, and I was actually selling black
Ah,
obsidian mirrors, and I was like, well, if I'm getting it wholesale price, why not?
why not?
Very convenient. But yes, that was actually the last question that I had for you from my viewers. But of course, I always have to ask this question at the end of every single interview, because I know the question will arise in the comments.
Okay,
Which
okay.
resources would you recommend if anyone wants to learn more about Brazilian folk magic?
Yes, with pleasure. I will start recommending the one that I have already shown. Like those, it's two books for Portuguese speakers. If you can read in Portuguese, you can pick up this one, Candomblé e Umbanda, Caminhos da Devoção Brasileira, de Wagner Gonçalves da Silva. This gentleman, he is a professor of the anthropology department of the University of São Paulo, and he specializes, like his studies, in culture and Afro-Brazilian religions. So it is somebody who knows exactly what they're talking about. It's a very thin book, but it is so packed with accurate, researched information. It is great for people who like history. You will really understand how spirituality evolved in Brazil from the colony times until today. This book is a masterpiece. So if you can understand Portuguese, there you go. Another one that I recommend, this is actually a collection. If you can read in Portuguese, there's this author called Eliana Paco. She has a collection called Umbanda Muito Prazer, which is like Umbanda, nice to meet you. And there are several different books. This one is about the entities of Umbanda, like all those spirits that I have mentioned: Caboclo, Pombagira, Exu, Preto Velho. She talks about each line of work here in this book. It is a very interesting one, very informative. Now, for the people who speak English or cannot read in Portuguese, there's an author that I recommend. He's a saint father. He's called Diego de Oxóssi. This book, for example, is called Sacred Leaves. It's by Llewellyn, by the way.
Nice.
A magical guide to Orisha herbal witchcraft. So this book is all about herbalism, Brazilian style, for anyone who's interested in taking a look.
Oh, I will have to get that book. I love different kinds of herbal folk practices.
And Diego de Oxóssi has several books. I'm going to show another one. There's this one that talks about Umbanda. So traditional Brazilian black magic, the secrets of the Umbanda magicians, also by Diego de Oxóssi. So we have Candomblé, which is the cult of the Orishas, Umbanda, which has many different entities into it, and Umbanda is dedicated to the left-hand path entities. So it's only like Exu, Pombagira, yeah. And I have another one here. For people who are interested in Pombagira, I recommend Maria de Padilha, Queen of the Souls, by Humberto Maggi and Veronica Rivas. It's a book about the history of Maria Padilha, because this is like the most known Pombagira nowadays, even internationally. And this is the story of who was the very first Maria de Padilha. She was a Spanish queen crowned after her death. This is a story you don't want to miss.
Wow.
That's all I'm gonna say. There's also Queen of the Seven Crossroads, which is another Pombagira, also by Humberto Maggi. He's a scholar, very good content. And last but not least, I do recommend as well the Book of Saint Cyprian. It can be a very interesting read, but I don't recommend you try to do everything that's in there, because it's like there's a lot of using animals, alive animals, sacrifices, that kind of thing. I'm not into it. I don't recommend you doing it. Just so you know, there's some nasty stuff in that book, but it is part of the history. I have to mention it.
And last but not least, of course, your channel is a good resource.
Oh, yes, go to my channel. There's a lot of information there.
Oh, but I think it's so cool that there are actually so many books in English about it, because I kind of always feel like with folk practices, it's so hard to find books in English.
I have to mention though that the English level will not be super, like, sometimes it happens in the text that they try to make a literal translation that makes no sense in English. It does happen, so don't expect academic English level from the books, okay? Just saying, just so you know.
The only thing that matters is that we understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, you can totally get the information out of the book. Sometimes there are a little mistakes, but it's been written by people who don't speak English as their first language, so be a little patient.
I think that just makes it seem more genuine.
Yeah, true, true. That's a very nice way of looking at it.
But all right. Thank you so, so much for this amazing interview. It was so fun. And as I expected, I learned so many new things. It was extremely interesting. And I bet all of my viewers will feel exactly the same way. Again, to my viewers, if you want to know even more about Brazilian folk magic, then of course, subscribe to Aster's channel. Again, link will be in the video description, of course. And definitely check out her interview that we just filmed that is also on her channel.
Yes.
Because that was also extremely fun. And yeah, with
Yes.
that being said,
Oh
thank
my
you
God.
so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I was really very happy to take a look at the post that you've made on the community tab and see the people interacting with it. I was like, oh my God, they are sending questions. Yeah, I'm really very happy to be here. And thank you for watching all of this until the end.
Yeah, people were definitely very, very excited to hear about a practice that is so, so vastly different from what I usually talk about on the channel. So thank you again so, so much for explaining everything so patiently and for giving us a little bit of a view on your personal practice. And
yeah, my pleasure. I hope that the Brazilians watching felt well represented.
Leave your thoughts about it in the comments. All right, everyone. And with that being said, I hope you also all enjoyed the interview. Again, make sure to subscribe to Aster's channel. And I will see you in another video. Bye.